Hi there. Today we are talking about Mendelian genetics. So to start, genetics is the study or the science of heredity. Heredity is the study of the way in which traits are passed on from parent to offspring. So if you have a highlighter or a different color writing utensil, a colored pencil, we want to highlight that those traits are passed on. Okay, hereditary things are passed on from one generation to the next. Next, let's talk about Gregor Mendel. So Mendelian genetics, named after Gregor Mendel. He was an Austrian monk and mathematician. He actually studied pea plants, like the green peas you eat at dinner or don't eat at dinner. Each characteristic that he saw in pea plants actually occurred in two different options. So, for example, in terms of stem height, the plants either had tall stems or short stems. For pod color, for the pea, the pod color was either green or yellow. There was no in-between. The pod shape was either smooth or pinched, seed color was yellow or green, and seed shape was either round or wrinkled. So he saw that things were only occurring in two distinct options. That leads us to his results. So based on his pea plant experiments, Mendel concluded that one form of the trait, so the tall form or the short form, seemed to show up over the other form. The trait that showed up he called the dominant trait, and the form that was hidden or didn't show up was called recessive. Okay, so in terms of dominant and recessive traits, the dominant trait is the trait that shows up more often, okay, shows up the most times. We represent the dominant trait with a capital letter. For our note purposes today, we will be using the letter T. Recessive is the trait that can be hidden, or the dominant trait sort of like overshadows or masks, and we represent that with a lowercase letter. Please make sure you can definitely tell the difference between your capital and lowercase letters. Now, for each trait that we talk about, we will be using two letters to code for one trait. So you would get one letter from your mom and one letter from your dad. So if you have two letters, and one's capital and one's lowercase, one word we use for that is hybrid. So it contains both contrasting traits, however the dominant trait appears. Okay, so for example, we would write that as a capital T, lowercase t in these notes. So you've got a dominant and a recessive gene for the trait, but the dominant gene will always mask or take over, and the dominant trait will be what appears like as the physical appearance for the offspring or the organism. As a reminder, a gene is a distinct location on a chromosome that controls a particular trait. Okay, and now we're going to talk about some new definitions or terms. So as we talk about genes and we do crosses between different organisms to see what their offspring could be like, the term homozygous and heterozygous come up a lot. So in terms of homozygous traits, okay, these are alleles that are the same. Alleles you can think of as genes. Okay, they're sort of interchangeable at this point. So in terms of a homozygous organism, they would have genes that are the same. So two capital or two lowercase. A synonym or something that means the same would be pure. So, for example, you can have capital T, or lowercase t, lowercase t. You have two of the same letters. Heterozygous means that the letters or the alleles are different. Another term is hybrid, and there's only one option for this. It's capital T, lowercase t. Notice I write the capital T first. We do that just like in our English language, the capital letter comes first in the word. Let's flip the sheet over. Some more terms are genotype and phenotype. So the genotype, we talk about the genetic makeup or the letters for the trait. So there are 3 examples. Capital T is a genotype. Capital T lowercase t is a genotype. And lowercase t is a genotype. Notice I'm only using t's in our notes, but depending on the example we're working with, it could be any letter. But the 2 letters do need to be the same. One could be uppercase, one could be lowercase, but you wouldn't be using a T and an O or a T and an R. They both need to be the same actual letter. So the genotype is the genetic makeup. The phenotype is the physical appearance. Okay, so the genotype being capital T, if we're talking about height, like stem height, capital T, this organism would be tall. Capital T lowercase t, if tall is dominant and short is recessive, this would still be tall. And then if you had 2 recessive genes, 2 lowercase t, this organism would be short. Okay, so let's play around with some of these words and do a Punnett square. So a Punnett square is a diagram to show the results of a cross between 2 individuals. Now this could be humans, this could be plants, this could be all sorts of different animals. So we tell you right here that capital T, which you know is the dominant trait, is tall, and lowercase t represents the recessive trait, which is short. We need to cross a homozygous dominant organism with a heterozygous organism. So homozygous means same. I like to write that above the word so I know it doesn't become too confusing. Dominant means we're using a capital letter. So if we have the same capital letters, we'd have 2 capital T's. Heterozygous means different. So we need 2 different size letters. We'd have a capital T and a lowercase t. For our Punnett square, we take the genes from the 2 organisms we are crossing, okay, also known as like the parent generation, and we put them on the top and the left-hand side. So I'll put this homozygous dominant organism, you spread the genes out, or the letters out, over each box, and then capital T, lowercase t, goes on the left-hand side. If you switch them, you just swapped which one was on the top and which was on the left, you'd still get the same outcome, so that's no problem. To fill in the Punnett square, you need to basically figure out where these 2 letters would intersect. So these capital T would intersect here. These 2 letters would intersect here. So we do a capital T, lowercase t. These 2 letters would intersect here. And these 2 letters, capital T, lowercase t, would intersect there. The boxes represent the possible outcomes for what the organisms would have. So like if these 2 people had offspring, they mated and had offspring, every time they mated, these would be the options or the possible outcomes for what their children could have for their genes. Okay, notice we're only talking about height, just 1 trait per Punnett square. So let's chat about the genotype. Genotype are the different combinations of letters. So in 2 of these boxes, there's a capital T, capital T. In the other 2 boxes, there's a capital T, lowercase t. So those are the only 2 genotypes that show up for the offspring. And it does ask for a percent. So because there's 4 boxes, we need a total of 100%. Each box gives us a 25% chance. So there's 2 boxes with capital T, so that means 50% of the boxes, or 50% of the offspring, would have capital T. Okay? And there's a 50% chance that their offspring would have capital T, lowercase t. So 50% chance that the offspring could have this genotype, 50% chance that the offspring could have this genotype. Phenotype is the physical characteristics. So capital T would result in tall offspring. Capital T, lowercase t would also result in tall offspring. You can combine that and just put tall 100%. If you put tall 50% and tall 50%, that would be fine as well. Okay? The phenotypes need to equal 100%. The genotypes also need to equal 100%. That is how we do a Punnett square.